Chris Carter here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It's Monday. The Steelers bring back their OTA practices on Tuesday. We've got Ray Fittipaldo on with us today. We also have a little bit of Noah Hiles talking some Pirates, but we want to ask Ray about, is this secondary one of the more underrated parts of the team? All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with one of our great Steelers beat writers, Ray Fittipaldo. And as always, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar on Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they're on the North Shore. They're right across the street from PNC Park on Federal Street. You go to Mike's Beer Bar, they were 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap at all times, with new ones rotating in and out. More on Mike's Beer Bar in a bit here. And as always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Subscribe to this channel for Post-Gazette Sports for all of our daily content from all of our Pittsburgh sports writers. Ray, we're back this week. The Steelers will be back Tuesday when they resume practice. But I wanted to lead off. We've talked a lot about the new offense. We'll get into more of the leadership parts in later bit in the show on this team. But I look at this secondary and how it's made up with Joey Porter Jr., the way he played last season, the way he could grow as a player this season. Donte Jackson as a replacement for Patrick Peterson, Minkah Fitzpatrick being there, but also with, I think, more support into DeShon Elliott and even kind of, Patrick Queen at linebacker, I think also helps the secondary, taking away some of the roles they have to worry about underneath. Is the Steelers secondary one of the more, if not the most underrated parts of this team going into the season because of the youth that it has and the ability it might have to get back to playing at a high level where it creates a lot of turnovers?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think you could see an upswing on this. I mean, listen, there's a reason they moved on from Patrick Peterson and brought in Donte Jackson. There was a reason they moved on from Keanu Neal and brought in DeShon Elliott. Now it's up to Jackson and Elliott to perform at a higher level than their predecessors. But yes, there's certainly reason to think that this secondary will be better than they were in 2023. I just looked at the numbers last week, Chris. Pass defense-wise, I think they were 16th, so right in the middle of the NFL in terms of yards allowed last year. So we'll see how those changes, how they make this defense, for them hopefully better. So, yeah, I think, you got younger with Jackson. They think they got better as well. Obviously, they got faster. And I think you get younger with a guy like Elliott too. And, to me, the biggest, linchpin is in all this. And they've been trying for years, Chris, to find Fitzpatrick's ideal partner at strong safety. And
yeah,
Edmonds did a lot of the dirty work for a while, but they just felt like there was some stuff that he didn't do well. So they moved on from him. And it's been KZ and it's been Neal and it's been different guys. Can Elliott step in? And he's young enough to grow with Fitzpatrick. Can he step in and be that all-around strong safety that they've been looking for? So, that's what I've been watching, this spring. I think it's great that Fitzpatrick has been present for all the OTAs. I think that chemistry, that learning together is important. So, Minkah's trying to make it work, but ultimately it'll be up to Elliott and how he meshes with him, and obviously Jackson, how he meshes with the rest of the secondary as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big part of this is going to be the chemistry, like you said. Part of it's also something that I've seen before with the Steelers. And it's, part of the leadership is with Minkah Fitzpatrick. Whenever you see Minkah Fitzpatrick in a practice, if he's practicing, he's practicing. When he's not practicing, he doesn't go to the sideline and get a swig of water. He steps way back behind the play, still on the defensive side of the ball, often stands with Terrell Austin, and he just watches the play break down, and he's just analyzing it. And something that has been so important for this Steelers secondary, especially since Terrell Austin really took over, is the amount of communication that they use to kind of coordinate how they want to fool quarterbacks, how they want to say, hey, we're lining up looking like we're in man, but we're really in zone, or we're lining up in this zone, but we're switching to this zone over here. And the idea is to try to force the quarterback into this specific mistake that we see potentially lining up with the way that the offense is used. And that's led to a lot of Minkah Fitzpatrick interceptions in the past. It didn't lead to any last year, but I think that's also because Minkah Fitzpatrick had to kind of compensate for so many other things the Steelers didn't have last season, like, strong safeties who could play in the box and take and help against the wrong, like dime linebackers, where the Steelers were really hurting last year. But you look at the additions of guys like DeShon Elliott, who, like you said, I think like Terrell Edmunds, he wasn't, he didn't live up to the first round pick billing, but he did a lot of the dirty work. He was the janitor. He helped cover in the slot. He helped cover tight ends. He could help against the run, but he wasn't a big playmaker. Like, he didn't make interceptions. That's where DeShon Elliott can come in. He can also help against the run. Meanwhile, also, like I was saying earlier, having guys like Patrick Queen and even a rookie Payton Wilson can help with faster, more athletic guys underneath who could help in coverage, so that now Minkah Fitzpatrick, he can just worry about his safety role a lot more. And I think that will allow him to get back into saying, hey, let's set these situations up so we can be in prime positions to create more turnovers.
Yeah, listen, Chris, everyone has to stay healthy, but I think in large part, a lot of their offseason moves, you mentioned Payton Wilson and Patrick Queen specifically, a lot of those moves were made, I think, to free up Minkah Fitzpatrick so he could return to that center fielder role where he was the Steelers' top playmaker on that defense. When he's been an all-pro, he's getting interceptions, he's getting forced fumbles, and he's getting fumble recoveries. And that hasn't been the case in 2 out of the last 3 years. As you mentioned, he's been playing different roles, more of a box guy, having to help out in places where he traditionally didn't have to help out. So if they can get him back to his traditional role where he's been an all-pro player, I think those investing a compensatory third-round pick in Wilson and spending the money you spent on Queen and Elliott in free agency will be well worth it. But everyone has to stay healthy, and we all know that's never been an issue with Queen, but for Payton Wilson and his injury history at NC State, yes, that was an issue for him.
It was an issue for him, and it was something he had to worry about. I mean, it's something that I think dropped his draft value into the third round, because there were people who looked at it. This guy had 3 interceptions last year for NC State. He broke up passes. He stuffed the run. He flew everywhere. He got the Butkus Award. He was one of the most athletic and best linebackers in college football, and yet he fell to the third round. Why? Because people were concerned how long will be in the NFL. I talked to people that covered him at NC State, and they're like, there's concerns from legitimate scouts and even some coaches that are saying, like, he might only last in the NFL for 4 or 5 years based off the injury history he has. And let's face it, he's also a 6'3" guy that can run like a 4.4 in the 40-yard dash. Like, those type of guys, often they're bigger, they're faster, but oftentimes they often leads to more violent collisions, because if they're playing fast, they're going to be leading into that. So that is something to take into consideration too. I look at this secondary, and I think especially on the Joey Porter Jr. side, where this is the guy who, as a rookie, had the lowest completion percentage allowed in the NFL for all guys that were targeted at least 50 times last year. Not just rookies, that's all cornerbacks. That, to me, if he can expand upon that, like last year, I think he got his feet under him. I think he knew how to kind of play different situations and take on certain spots to be in the right position. But now, if he can turn that this year into doing that and being the guy that intercepts the football when they start throwing his way, I think that can be a part of it. Or even if he's just the guy that's like, hey, no one's targeting the side of the field that he's on because they're not throwing him, they're going after Donte Jackson. If the Steelers can know that, they can plan around that and create situations where, hey, we know you're not going after Joey Porter Jr., so now if you're going over here, this is where we'll set up different situations for Donte Jackson, Minkah Fitzpatrick, or other players to get interceptions.
And that probably is the scenario that we're going to see a lot, right? Like, if we think Joey is that guy, I think you're going to see a lot of offensive coordinators attack Donte Jackson, because let's face it, Donte Jackson probably had the worst year statistically of his career last year. 0 interceptions. I think a career high passer rating against. I think it was 107.7 or something like that. It was by far his worst year. Now, I talked to Donte Jackson last week. He's extremely confident, and he's really upbeat that he can return to form this season. But the fact of the matter is, he's coming to the Steelers after probably the worst year of his career. And that's why he was on the trading block, and that's why the Carolina Panthers were going to release him if they couldn't try to find a trade partner for them. Now, that doesn't mean that the Steelers are taking another team's damaged goods. Sometimes players just fit better in different schemes. Part of Donte Jackson's repertoire is his ability to play in run support. He might be a smaller guy, but he's played very well in run support over the years. And as we mentioned, they're not bringing him in here to be their number one corner. They're bringing him in here to be the number two corner.
Right.
That's all they need him to be here in 2024.
Agreed. That's all they need him to be. And if he's a solid number two corner and Joey Porter Jr. takes steps forward, you have a 1-2 punch at cornerback that can be a real problem. And you have safeties that are going to be flying around. I also think DeMonte KZ, we should leave him out of this, whereas he's not going to be the supreme playmaker. Now, if he's the third safety and he can kind of get back to kind of just being more of the free safety guy who helps, in the deeper part of the field, all those things lead to this group being maybe a lot better than what a lot of people are talking about. I want to talk to Ray about an article he's been working on, and that's on the young leadership emerging on the Steelers roster. We'll do that here on the North Shore Drive podcast, brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, it is the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they have over 500 different available beers, 300 of those beers from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. And when you go there, they're always switching new ones in and out. Whether you like IPAs, sours, pale ale, summer beers, they got lots of summer beers for you right now. And also, they're the best place to go before, during, after Pirates games. They have over 20 televisions. So whether you want to catch, Caitlin Clark in the latest WNBA game or the NBA Finals or the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, all of that can be seen right at Mike's Beer Bar. And they have amazing outdoor seating as well, so you can outlook the skyline, get a look on the skyline of Pittsburgh there while you're enjoying a great night out at Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh. Go there today, and when you get there, tell them Chris sent you. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, you're working on an article here, and it's kind of, and from what I understand, you're kind of focusing on some of the things we've been hearing about some of the young leaders. Now, we know that there's leadership on the Steelers team right now. You got Minkah Fitzpatrick, you got Cam Hayward, you got TJ Watt, but those are all defensive guys. Offensively, they need players to emerge as leaders, and maybe Russell Wilson becomes that for this year. But Russell Wilson ain't going to be around for a very long time, if even just past this year at all. They need young guys to emerge. Who are some of the players that you're hearing good things about as far as how they're trying to step up as young leaders on this team right now?
Yeah, Dan Moore mentioned this last week. 1 year ago, Dan Moore was asked to mentor Broderick Jones as he came into the league as a rookie. And he did it, with open arms, even though there was a lot of speculation, Chris, that Broderick Jones eventually was going to take his job. But as we all know, the way it turned out, Broderick Jones eventually took Chuks Okorafor for his job, and Dan Moore was able to hang on to that job. And now, here with 3 rookie offensive linemen selected in the draft in late April, it's Broderick Jones who's taking on a leadership role. And a lot of times it's how Mike Tomlin sort of orchestrates this, right? So I can go back to, TJ Watt's rookie year. He put him next to Ben Roethlisberger's locker. Stephon Tuitt was a locker or two away from Cam Hayward. So Mike Tomlin kind of tries to orchestrate, who's going to be taking who under their wings. And he put Zach Frazier, the rookie center, next to Jones. We heard Dan Moore talk about how Zach sits next to Broderick in meetings. Broderick is helping him along. And also Troy Fautanu and Mason McCormick as well. But specifically, he's taken Zach Frazier under his wing. So it's just kind of neat to see how Jones is doing that 1 year after Dan Moore did it for him. And, it's something that offensive lines do all the time, but it's kind of underappreciated the way it works out, I think.
I think so too, because when I was there right when Dan Moore was talking about that, and you hear that about Broderick Jones, the Steelers need guys to step up now. Like, as far as young leaders, we can say, these guys are young, they're developing. But the fact of the matter is, if this team wants to compete soon, it needs guys to mature quickly that are on rookie deals, so that while they're still paying guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt top dollar, that some of these guys that they aren't paying top dollar are playing like they should get top dollar. And like they're like helping other guys get there as well. That was something that really worked for the Steelers of the 2000s. You had guys who could police themselves. James Ferrier, Casey Hampton, they were guys that, when you came into the Steelers defense, it was a culture that you were being brought in on. Even the Steelers of the 2010s, Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro, there was a tone set by them that everyone could kind of get behind. And there was no transition of leadership for the offense. The defense has had it since the Cowher days of the early 2000s. It's been something you could go see from Hampton to Ferrier to Harrison to Polamalu to Shazier to Timmons to Hayward to now Minkah Fitzpatrick. And there was kind of that on offense with Ben Roethlisberger, but then when you had him, Pouncey, and DeCastro all retire within a year of each other, and also the exodus of guys like Bell and Brown, guys that were maybe not leaders, but staple playmakers. There was no transition there. It was just all kind of like a clean cut, like hey, we need a whole new group of people to emerge, and it's taken time to get that from players. And sure, guys like Najee Harris, guys like Pat Freiermuth, I think they're helping. They're kind of they've been trying to help push things in the right direction, but they need young guys now to step into those roles, especially with this new offensive coordinator. It can all be a big part of getting the resurgence of the Steelers offense.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, look at how much that offensive line has changed in recent years. Dan Moore is the most tenured starter on that group, and there's a question about whether he'll even be in the starting lineup at the beginning of the season. After Dan Moore, it's James Daniels. James Daniels has 2 years of starting experience under his belt after coming over as a free agent. He's in the last year of his deal, so he'll have 3 years. There's a reason they got younger. They wanted to get younger because they wanted to get better. And the nucleus of this offensive line 3, 4, 5 years from now is going to be Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, and Broderick Jones. Guys like Isaac Seumalo, who are very important now, James Daniels, guys, they're not going to be here in 2026, okay? It's going to be the nucleus of the young guys. They want them to grow together the way Pouncey, Gilbert, and DeCastro grew together way back, like 2010s in that era. So, I think it's very important that Jones takes on this role. I think it's good that he takes on this role. It's only going to mean that when he is one of the more tenured guys, that the leadership is going to be more natural for him as well.
Absolutely. We'll keep an eye on that leadership and how it develops for the Steelers as OTAs resume Tuesday. Read all about it at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Ray, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to switch topics here. We got to talk to Noah Hiles about the Pirates. He has their May report card. All of that here can be read on the North Shore Drive podcast. We'll talk about it here next on the show. It's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast, and now we talk some Pirates. The Buccos have just finished out their road trip in Toronto, which means our guys, Noah Hiles and Andrew Destin, were on the scene. He's still in Canada. Here's Noah Hiles talking with us about the Pirates. Now, they did lose Sunday, but they've had a very up and down May, and you did a report card on the Pirates for May, and I want to work through this report card with you, Noah, because I think there's some really interesting, the highs and the lows of the team right now. And it's a lot of what we've been talking about on the show. But of course, we got to start with the starting pitching. You gave it an A-, Noah. And I think everyone kind of agrees, like everyone's happy with the starting rotation right now.
Yeah, there's no reason to be upset. I'll start off by saying the reason it was an A-, not an A, Jared Jones got shelled in this final start of the month, and then Martin Perez had a pretty bad month actually. So, But I mean, overall, you had 3 high-quality efforts from guys in your rotation. Skeen, since he's been up, has been electrifying, and Bailey Falter and Mitch Keller look like all-stars right now. Jared Jones, still, for as bad as he looked against Detroit, he had 4 quality starts this month. Some people are worried about him. I'm not really. I think it's just part of growing up, as a rookie. Then the 5th starter, whoever it's going to be moving forward, whether it be Perez or Priester, they need a little bit more there. But overall, between just the way these guys can go efficiently through lineups, the difference in stuff and talent, there's a lot to like with that starting rotation. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot more A's moving forward into the following months.
It certainly seems like the part of the team that's going to carry the Pirates throughout the season if they're to make a run at any point. But then on the flip side, the other side of the pitching, you give the bullpen a straight up F.
Yeah.
It has been terrible though. How many situations they have blown or not just been able to hold up after the rotation has done an amazing job setting this team up.
Yeah, I mean, F stands for failure, and I mean that's this bullpen failed the Pirates numerous times last month. When you think about it, I listed in here. I mean, you could go to specific moments like in Skeens' debut where they walked in. Geez, I mean, how many was that? 7 runs in an inning or something like that.
Yeah.
And they ended up winning that game, which is kind of crazy. But I mean, just an ugly debacle like that. Or you look at the San Francisco series where they blow a 5-run lead and then a 4-run lead and back-to-back games. I mean, they win those 2 games, Carter. They reach 500 the following series after taking 2 or 3 from Atlanta. So I just, they have not been good enough. And it's been the guys that they needed to be good. In April, it was David Bednar who was the problem. He's been a lot better this month, or last month, I should say. Aroldis Chapman has been a huge issue. I mean, he led the National League in walks among relievers. He issued 11 of them. He had a negative .4 WAR, which was 4th worst among all National League pitchers. And then you have Bednar and you have Holderman who had a good month. But then when you have a guy like Chapman who you're paying $10.5 million in a key spot consistently messing up, it puts more pressure on your rookies. And you saw rookie struggles from guys like Hunter Stratton, Kyle Nicholas, Carmen Mlodzinski. It was a bad month. I will say the bullpen looked overall pretty strong in this series here in Toronto. I mean, they were great on Friday night in the extra inning game. Luis Ortiz with a 3-inning save on Saturday. And Sunday, they came in and allowed inherited runners to score. Wasn't, I would say, an amazing effort from them. But collectively, I think this was their best series they've had in quite some time.
Going over the position players here, you rose the catchers from being an F to a C minus. How much of that was the bat of Joey Bart and what he was able to bring to the table?
I think it's part of it, yeah. I mean, Joey Bart, those numbers, I mean, it's in a very small sample size, obviously, because it's in a month and he's a platoon guy. But he came up with some big hits. He was consistent. And you pair him with, I mean, Yasmani Grandal has been a plus glove behind the plate. They're 11-5 in games that Yasmani Grandal started. And then you pair that with Bart, who has been a nice little spark plug at the plate and a guy who can drive runs, hit a grand slam last month. They've been a nice little duo. I don't know when Joey Bart's going to be back. It's sounding like it might be a while with his thumb injury, but that tandem together was a lot more productive than Henry Davis in the first month of the season, who really struggled, and they needed more production on both ends of the game there, both in the field and at the plate, and they got it from that duo.
And you gave the infield a B minus. How I want to ask you this. If Rowdy Tellez was not the Pirates' first baseman, what would be your adjusted grade?
Well, I mean, it'd probably only be a B because for half the month he really wasn't the first baseman. They kind of benched him and he didn't play a lot. I mean, statistically, Rowdy Tellez was the worst player in the National League last month. It was worth negative .6 WAR, which means he was WAR calculates how many wins you bring your team. He cost the Pirates more than half a game in 1 month with how bad he played in May. But, I mean, aside from that, the infield was the story as to why this offense got going. Nick Gonzalez came up, and he's been arguably the club's best hitter since his arrival. O'Neal Cruz had a stellar first half of the month, kind of cooled down. Jared Triolo got it going toward the end of the month, playing third base, and Brian Hayes' spot while he was on the IL, reached base 11 straight games. There's a lot to like there. And that's the group you were hoping to see get it going where, I mean, sure, the other group was the outfield, who I know we'll talk about next, and they didn't really get moving. But with Connor Joe taking over at first base primarily now, and then Gonzalez, I mean, those are 2 big additions compared to what you had every day in April, essentially, with Tellez and Triolo at first and second. So you upgraded there. O'Neal Cruz played a lot better at shortstop. Third base, didn't get much because Brian was hurt, and then they moved Triolo over there, but you're getting good defense over there. And overall, as a net, I mean, that core that we just talked about, I mean, they made a difference at the plate.
And let's switch to the outfield, because this was supposed to be at least, one of the strengths of the Pirates, with Brian Reynolds out there, Michael A. Taylor they brought in, but it hasn't been that throughout this season. And I think that's one of the really disappointing parts of the Pirates roster, considering everything else that they've been able to do right with the starting rotation.
Yeah, I mean, Reynolds has been slightly above average this season. That's what maybe you expect. I think they should probably expect a little bit more considering what he's getting paid. But he's been fine. But aside from him, yeah, there's not been a lot of offense. Edward Olivares has had his moments. He's hit the ball really hard consistently, but he's a platoon guy. You're not expecting him to be a tremendous difference maker. The bigger disappointments in this group are, of course, Sawinski, who's now in AAA again. He got demoted last month. And then Michael A. Taylor, who statistically is one of the best defensive players in baseball, especially as an outfielder. But the offense is just not there. The guy hasn't hit consistently since the first week and a half of the season. He batted 125 last month. He's striking out. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know it's got to be at least over 30% of his at-bats. It's not good, and he's making a lot of adjustments, and they need to get more production out of that outfield spot because, you take Connor Joe out of that outfield to move him at first base to address the hole there. You can maybe play Olivares there, but you need your outfield to produce at the plate. It can't just be one guy doing it, and especially if that one guy is only hitting 250. So, yeah, not good enough for the outfield.
I want to combine these conversations here real quick. Designated hitter, you gave an A because Andrew McCutchen has just been lights out, but Henry Davis has been called back up, as we've reported here at the Post-Gazette. And now you have the question as far as where do you put him, because you graded the catchers really well, and DH is more so what Henry Davis was helping with before anyways. Where does Henry Davis fit in? Like, I feel like you can't take Kutch out of the DH spot with the way he's playing right now.
No, you play him at catcher because Bart's on the IL right now, so he's not going to be playing for a minute. And Grandal, for as good as the team has looked with Grandal behind the plate, I mean, he's one bad stride away running the bases from being on the IL himself. I mean, that's just kind of been the MO with Yasmani throughout his recent career history. He's just very prone to injury. So, I think you bring Henry Davis up here and you play him in a similar role to what Joey Bart was playing. If there's 6 games a week, you split him 3-3.
That makes sense there. But overall, this is a team where we're going over these grades here. It's very up and down, and that just kind of seems who the Pirates are. Like you gave the bench a B-, the coaching a C-, and it feels like these are all kind of muddling around an average team here. Between the high grades of the starting pitching, the failing grades of the bullpen, and then just the kind of menial grades of the position players. Is there a way for this team to kind of wake out of this? And is there a group that you think has the best chance to outperform what they've been doing so far to help the Pirates get improved down the stretch here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to a couple of individuals, really. And I know it's a team game, but if the starting pitching is going to continue doing this, which I think it can, just based off of what we've seen from a third of the season now, it seems sustainable what Falter and we know what Mitch Keller's capable of. And with these 2 rookies, you're going to have good starting pitching. The bullpen has to improve. And if that's not something you can do internally with guys in the farm system, then you got to start bringing people in from other teams via trade, because it cannot be this bad. And then, but as far as offensive production goes, you would hope that Henry Davis and Jack Sawinski will both be a part of your everyday lineup again by the midpoint of June. And if they're just average baseball players, Chris, this team probably goes over 500 in June. I mean, they went 12-14 last month in 26 games, and they lost a few of them they had no business losing because the bullpen kind of, let it get out of hand. So if the bullpen plays better and you get offensive production from 2 cornerstones of your franchise who you invested in and believe that they are going to be guys that can help you reach the playoffs the next time this team's playing meaningful baseball, that's the key. So getting those 2 guys going, we saw other guys break out of their slumps and make a difference. Sawinski, Davis, bullpen. If those three things improve in June, this team should remain within a couple of games of that wild card spot.
Absolutely. They are currently 9 games back first of the division, a couple games out of the wild card race, only 5 games back of 500. They got the Los Angeles Dodgers coming to town Tuesday through Thursday. That's going to be an interesting series. And the best place to read about all of that is the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, for all the work from our guys, Noah Hiles and Andrew Destin. Noah, thanks so much for joining us here on the North Shore Drive podcast. As always, read Noah's work at post-gazette.com. Find all of our shows here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily content that comes out from all of our writers. We're back Wednesday with more here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.